I'm not saying you are doing the wrong thing by coming here. It is the right thing in its way. You want to find something soft, something warm in all this. Your searching led you here. That's a good thing. I am only concerned that it be good, too, for my son. I mean no harm. What is the man's name? George Harvey. It was the first time he'd said it aloud to anyone but Len Fenneman. She paused and stood. Turning her back to him, she walked over to first one window and then the other and drew the curtains back. It was the after-school light that she loved. She watched for Ray as he walked up the road. Ray will come now. I will go to meet him. If you'll excuse me, I need to put on my coat and boots. She paused. Mr. Salmon, she said, I would do exactly what you were doing. I would talk to everyone I needed to. I would not tell too many people his name. When I was sure, she said, I would find a quiet way, and I would kill him. He could hear her in the hallway, the metal clank of hangers as she got her coat. A few minutes later the door was opened and closed. A cold breeze came in from the outside, and then out on the road he could see a mother greet her son. Neither of them smiled. Their heads bent low, their mouths moved. Ray took in the fact that my father was waiting for him inside his home. At first my mother and I thought it was just the obvious that marked Len Fenneman as different from the rest of the force. He was smaller than the hulking uniforms who frequently accompanied him. Then there were the less obvious traits too. The way he often seemed to be thinking to himself, how he wasn't much for joking or trying to be anything but serious when he talked about me and the circumstances of the case. But talking with my mother, Len Fenneman had shown himself for what he was, an optimist. He believed my killer would be caught. Maybe not today or tomorrow, he said to my mother, but someday he'll do something uncontrollable. They are too uncontrolled in their habits not to. My mother was left to entertain Len Fenneman until my father arrived home from the Sings. On the table in the family room, Buckley's crayons were scattered across the butcher paper my mother had laid down. Buckley and Nate had drawn until their heads began to nod like heavy flowers, and my mother had plucked them up in her arms, first one and then the other, and brought them over to the couch. They slept there end to end with their feet almost touching in the centre. Then Fenneman knew enough to talk in hushed whispers, but he wasn't, my mother noted, a worshipper of children. He watched her carry the two boys, but did not stand to help or comment on them the way the other policemen always did, defining her by her children, both living and dead. Jack wants to talk to you, my mother said, but I'm sure you're too busy to wait. Not too busy. I saw a black strand of her hair fall from where she had tucked it behind her ear. It softened her face. I saw Len see it too. He went over to that poor Racing's house, she said, and tucked the fallen hair back in its proper place. I'm sorry we had to question him, Len said. Yes, she said. No young boy is capable of... She couldn't say it, and he didn't make her. His alibi was airtight. My mother took up a crayon from the butcher paper. Len Fenneman watched my mother draw stick figures and stick dogs. Buckley and Nate made quiet sounds of sleep on the couch. My brother curled up into a fetal position and a moment later placed his thumb in his mouth to suck. It was a habit my mother had told us all we must help him break. Now she envied such easy peace. You remind me of my wife, Len said after a long silence, during which my mother had drawn an orange poodle and what looked like a blue horse undergoing electroshock treatment. She can't draw either? She wasn't much of a talker when there was nothing to say. A few more minutes passed. A yellow ball of sun, a brown house with flowers outside the door, pink, blue, purple. Use the past tense. They both had the garage door. She died soon after we were married, he said. Daddy! Buckley yelled and leapt up, forgetting Nate and everyone else. I'm sorry, she said to Len. I am too, he said. About Susie. Really. In the back hall, my father greeted Buckley and Nate with high cheers and calls for oxygen, as he always did when we besieged him after a long day. Even if it felt false, elevating his mood for my brother was often the favourite part of his day. My mother stared at Len Fenneman while my father walked toward the family room from the back. "Rush to the sink," I felt like saying to her. "Stare down the hole and look into the earth. I'm down there waiting. I'm up here watching." Len Fenneman had been the one that first asked my mother for my school picture when the police thought I might be found alive. In his wallet, my photos sat in a stack. Among these dead children and strangers was a picture of his wife. If a case had been solved, he had written the date of its resolution on the back of the photo. If the case was still open, in his mind, if not in the official files of the police, it was blank. There was nothing on the back of mine. There was nothing on his wife's. "Len, how are you?" my father asked, holiday up and wiggling back and forth for my father to pet him. "I hear you went to see Ray sing," Len said. "Boys, why don't you go play in Buckley's room?" my mother suggested. "Detective Fenneman and Daddy need to talk."